life, I'm sure that, like most of us, you've gone through a situation where you're in the middle of a personal crisis. You've got a flat tire, and then you get fired, and then your partner dumps you all on the same day. And so you call up your friend, and you're just looking for a little bit of support, and you find yourself just pouring your heart out to them and telling them all about how everything in your life is terrible right now. And then they tell you something like, oh, you'll get over it. Just think happy thoughts, or be positive. It can't be worse, right? Just be happy. And you're like, okay, so I literally just told you everything about my life that fucking sucks, and then you throw some inspirational poster one-liner at me, like, wow, okay, I'm positively thinking about the end of our friendship right now. It's like, in those situations where you're looking for a little bit of support and validation, you don't want the cliched one-liners, right? You want a little bit of validation that the negativity that you're experiencing is okay, and that other people see it too. And that's the difference between what is now coming to be called toxic positivity and actual support. So toxic positivity is telling someone to just look at the bright side when they're in the middle of a personal crisis looking for support. And actual support is putting yourself in their shoes and accepting their feelings for what they are, even if it's messy and difficult and unpleasant. Especially if it's those things, because when we're in the middle of a crisis, we don't want a cliched one-liner. We want to feel understood and validated, and we want a little bit of hope. And, most of the time, people's intentions with these dense and really, really insincere feeling one-liners is not to be malicious. Most of the time, people's intentions are really good. It's just they don't understand how to be supportive, because that's not something that's really taught in our culture. And especially in the working class, like, we're just taught to shut up and deal with it, right? Toxic positivity makes us feel unsafe to express our negative emotions, and negativity thrives in isolation, right? And it can make people think that there's something wrong with them for being upset about a situation that almost anyone would be upset in. And it makes them feel like they're kind of a piece of shit because they can't just choose happiness and flip the switch in your brain. And this kind of thinking is really damaging, especially to people who have fragile mental health issues. And it's forget that, it's damaging to everyone. And toxic positivity also categorizes everything as fundamentally good or evil, or positive or negative, And that leads you into the trap of dualism, which in all of the Eastern philosophies, that is exactly what you're trying to avoid. When we fall into the trap of dualism, we find ourselves obsessing over categorizing every situation, every person, every thought, every idea, every thing, every circumstance that comes into our life as fundamentally positive or negative. And this prevents us from allowing ourselves to fully experience life, because we find ourselves becoming constantly terrified of negative outcomes. So we just don't do it because we're afraid to fail. So we never try. And this is why I've adopted a principle of neutrality with my thoughts. And I learned this first in meditation, and then a lot of other schools of thought teach this as well. So in science, we're all familiar with the phrase, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And now I want to take that and apply it to just about everything in life, especially events, circumstances, people, crises, jobs, everything, right? Every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Your job is to uncover the reaction. Make it into a game. I actually really love doing this now, because anytime that I see a situation that I immediately view as negative, I take a step back and I think, okay, what's the reaction here? How could this be good? For example, about a year and a half ago, I got stuck in Nepal while I was traveling, and there was a transportation strike, and I missed my flight. I couldn't get another one for 5 days. It ended up costing me a couple $100, which I later got refunded through travel insurance. But point is, most people would have had a complete meltdown. I, on the other hand, saw it as an opportunity to spend time with someone that I connected with on the trip, and now we're living together. So it was a phenomenal ending to a situation that I could have easily let my emotions take in a completely opposite direction. But no, I got 5 more days somewhere. Was it a humongous pain in the ass? Definitely. But did I get something amazingly life-changing out of it? Without a doubt. And it turns out the same thing is true for just about everything else in life as well. Most things in life are fundamentally neutral until you describe some sort of value, judgment, or meaning to them. In an earlier video, I had talked briefly about my experience at the end of 2017, where my life kind of came crashing down around me, and it left me jobless and totaling my car and in the shittiest mental place that I've been in to date. And I found myself, for the first time in my entire career, with no way to get to work and no job to get to. And I realized that I was in a pretty terrible headspace because I was having panic attacks on the regular, and I couldn't stop crying, and I was shaking all the time, and I couldn't eat, and I knew that I needed to address some things in my life. And because I hated the person I was becoming, I hated the way that my life was unfolding, and so I needed to have a very frank conversation with myself. And at the time, it was incredibly painful and incredibly messy, and it was a lot of self-honesty that was super uncomfortable. And I really was not happy during that point. But I look back now, and I'm so grateful that everything happened the way that it did, because if I hadn't been forced to leave my job and not be able to look for a new one for a period of time there, I wouldn't have taken the time to get to know myself in the way that I did. And because I took that time, I'm a completely different person now than I was a year and a half ago, and it's changed my life in the most amazing ways and brought opportunities into my life that I would have never imagined. And I think that's true for a lot of things, but I could focus solely on the negatives, or I could realize that there's also positives to it. And this isn't just some sort of toxic positivity, which is why I wanted to cover that first, because this takes away the possibility of toxic positivity and focuses instead on what we can change. We can't change our thoughts, but we can change the meaning we give them. And we can change the meaning we give them, and we can change the meaning we give any event that's unfolding in our life by simply stepping back and allowing ourselves to observe and accept both possible outcomes of anything, of a person, of a situation, of an event, of a thought, of a job. Everything in life is fundamentally neutral until you give it meaning, until you assign a value judgment to it. So really, can you think of a time in your life where your initial reaction was, oh my God, this is the worst thing that's ever happening to me. This is such an unfortunate event. My life is ruined now, etc. And then a couple months or a couple years later, you look back and you're like, holy shit, I'm so glad that happened now, because if that hadn't happened, this wouldn't have happened in my life. And because this happened, everything is better, you know? How many of you ever been through a really traumatic breakup with someone, and then secretly on the inside, you knew it wasn't gonna work out anyway? You know, we always know deep down, we're like, this isn't the person for me, but it's working right now, so I'm not gonna fuck with it, right? Because it's doing its job. And then you look back and you're like, holy shit, I'm so glad I never went any further in that relationship with that person than I absolutely had to, you know? If it's a marriage you're in and you're getting divorced, yeah, it's gonna be a giant pain in your ass, but what are you gaining? You're gaining freedom. You're gaining your space back. You're gaining the opportunity to figure out who you are. If you get fired from your job, yeah, immediately on the surface, that sucks. That sucks a lot. But you know what? It's giving you the opportunity to find a better space with a crew that likes you and respects you and sees you for who you are and understands the value and the contribution that you can bring to their establishment, rather than just backing you into a corner and making you peel carrots for 9 straight hours. Everything is neutral. And when we understand this, it allows us to be a lot more objective in the way that we interact with ourselves and with others.
German philosopher Eckhart Tolle says, "The primary cause of unhappiness is never the situation, but rather our thoughts about it. Be aware of the thoughts you are thinking." Happy people focus on what they have, whereas unhappy people focus on what's missing. What are you focusing on?